أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وصلي عليه في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملأ الأعلى يا رب العالمين أوصيكم نفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل كما جاء في محكم التنزيل يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Brothers and sisters, we always begin seeking the refuge, the protection, the favor, the blessing of our beloved provider, creator, sustainer, and maintainer, who has given us this life that we're living in. He has called us to be sitting here right now. He expects us to respond to His message, to His ayat. Ayah means a sign, something that catches your attention. Miracles in the Quran. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى تِسْعَ آيَاتٍ. We gave Moses 9 signs. These are His miracles, not 9 verses of the Torah. So the idea is everything in the Quran and what it calls to is supposed to move you, take your attention, and give you some inspiration. So that's why we've come here today. Last week, we talked about the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. There's no question that as he started his mission for truth and justice, it seemed a bit far-reaching, virtually impossible to achieve his goal. As a preacher, obviously he greatly cared about his people. He deeply wanted them to achieve liberation and to overcome these injustices that they lived as a standard reality. He put his faith in God. He worked hard to mobilize his community. We cannot overstate that his success is mostly due to the resulting answer of the call that he made, that he believed God called him to call people to do. That when people responded in hundreds and thousands, it was their sacrifice and their struggle in order to achieve their freedom and justice that they started to achieve at a very fast rate. If Martin Luther King Jr. was just a great orator, and everybody said, wow, listen to his speech, but yet nobody marched, nobody put themselves in an uncomfortable situation, nobody prioritized their work, what they stood for and what they did according to this message, then we would not be sitting here in any sort of a society like we are. It's a very different society because of the people responding. We actually do have a mommy's room in the back here, and there's a live broadcast of the sermon. It's back there. There's a mommy's room right here, and there's a live broadcast. You can hear the sermon and actually see the imam right there. So we should not forget or lose sight of the fact that while most African Americans adored Martin Luther King Jr., and they really appreciated what he stood for, at the same time most of them did not really get up and march and put themselves in tough situations in answering his call. They were, like many Muslims are today, like many Americans are today, filled with pessimism. Apathy, we call it. Apathy is a sense of, we can't do anything. I'm just going to worry about my own situation, pay my bills. It's called apathy. In Arabic, we call it futur. It is a very, very lowly state of character and purpose and meaning. So many people are like, I just need to worry about my own situation. I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. I don't want to create an uncomfortable situation for myself and my family, or my work, or my income. But the success that they had that drastically changed history in this country, just like the drastic change in world history in the Arabian Peninsula 14 centuries ago, is because of the sacrifices that those normal human beings made, thus becoming exceptional human beings of world history, that they're able to respond to this call. Not just to hear it and say, oh, mashallah, that sounds good. Those are good words. But rather to say, I'm joining this effort. I'm going to work to actualize that call in those words. So we're celebrating MLK's legacy now 50 years after he was assassinated because they answered his call. They truly cared more about the whole of their community rather than their own selfish comfort zones that they were used to. So for generations, like the African American community, the Muslim community worldwide sees decadence, it sees oppression, it sees standardized poverty, illiteracy, and the list goes on. But that wasn't always the case. The Prophet ﷺ and his companions, radiyallahu anhum, may God be pleased with them, they were our example. And they brought about together as a collective the greatest transformation known to any people in the history of mankind. You see, before they were living in Jahiliyyah, not because they were all idiots or ignorant people in general. Many of them were well educated, but they were morally void. They were morally ignorant. They did not have divine guidance. And so therefore, they just accepted the norms of their society. They were comfortable with the way things were. They didn't really see the problems clearly, and they didn't see a need to stand up and to sacrifice in devotion to Allah Azza wa Jal for fixing this society for a better place. Islam instilled in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions the lasting mark of two main qualities that were done as a tight-knit collective. These two qualities, as individuals or small groups, will never amount to anything. But they were a jama'ah. That's what they call it, Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. The people who are following the Prophet Muhammad's example as a unified collective, working together, unified at the heart. And so they worked together in their devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in personal sacrifice. They did that together as a spiritual family, and that was the secret of their success. Their mentality was that of their forefather Abraham. The Quran emphasized time and time and time again that you should follow the religion of Abraham, follow the way of Abraham alayhi salatu wassalam. Peace and blessings be upon him. Why? Because as a young man, he did not just accept the status quo of corruption and evil in his society. He was not trying to keep a comfort zone for himself because, oh, that's my dad, and this is the way our people are, and all of that, and let's just accept it the way it is. No, he stood up knowing the consequences, knowing that people would respond harshly to him because he knew that that was right, spiritually and rationally. That was his hallmark, spiritual, rational thought. What is right by the soul and right by human beings. And that was the Abrahamic model that we are called to establish in our lives. So this led to a golden era of world history, the Islamic State. Now we have all been mass brainwashed that the idea of a society built on scriptural values and run based upon the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah is going to be some horrific, terrible, evil thing that nobody would ever want to be part of. But we saw for 8 centuries that inspirational scriptural society was the golden era of about a third of the civilized world. It was basically the rooted factor of a giant civilization of people who saw intellectual and spiritual growth as hand in hand, and so they were producing and contributing as a society, and they became the world leaders in philosophy, in technology, in science, in morality. And the people would go to learn from these Muslims, and it was their religion that defined them as such. But they had to go through a lot of struggles to get where they went. So it is Allah's sunnah in the world, whether it be here and establishing this country with many corrupt elements throughout its history, trying to bring down a lofty ideal that was put up by some of the people who established this country. Similarly, in our history, as we saw with ISIS, some people come in with some crazy ideas and they try to cherry pick some things for their own political interests, thus contradicting with the foundations of the original idea. And so it's Allah's sunnah that anytime people work hard to sacrifice their comfort zone, to do the right thing with good intentions, we see a lasting impact. So the state of our nation that we see right now as Muslim people, as Americans, is apathy. Man, that's just the way it is. The corporate structure, I gotta pay all these bills, I have this job, and I'm responsible for all these things. And so we're not gonna fix society. We're not gonna get rights for Muslims. We're not gonna be able to achieve any of this. You can't change it. These are just, lofty claims by someone overly fooled by their religion. And that is those thought processes in history have been proven wrong time and time again. So the question is, where do we stand in this issue? So the Quran talks about what it means to be devoted. And Allah tells us the example of the angels. وَلَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَنْ عِندَهُ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِهِ وَلَا يَسْتَحْسِرُونَ يُسَبِّحُونَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ لَا يَفْتُرُونَ. It says that He owns all that is in the heavens and the universe. All things belong to Him. And those who are closest to Him, the general meaning is the angels, that they are not arrogant to be His servants. They are very proud to be His servants. They are not arrogant to not serve Him. And they never get tired of the servitude. There are 2 cars parked in the turning lane on the main road. This is completely unacceptable. If your car is parked in the turning lane on the main road, you can expect that it will get towed because you are doing a crime at the mosque. So let's make sure that we treat the mosque like any other place. I am not trying to be judgmental or harsh, but it has come to me from many of our community that people come here thinking that there is a lowly standard for this place. And if you psychologically break it down, and I won't do it for you, where they got this idea, why this one building would have a lower standard, it's actually reflecting what I'm talking about in this sermon. It's a very unfortunate reality. That we would never park like that in any other place in this city. But when we come here, we think, oh yeah, that's the masjid. It reminds me of something. We should be in a state of growth. Striving for excellence is what our mission statement says. So of course we're not going to be angels. People say, so-and-so is like an angel, he or she is not like an angel. We're not going to be angels. Worshipping God all day, every day, never tiring from it. But the success of the human soul is in joining the angels in doing God's will by impulse and by natural inclination, rather than serving animalistic ways of serving personal impulse, of personal desire, of worldly interest. So there was a great companion of the Prophet ﷺ, his name is Hanzala. He was crying, walking around Medina. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu says, Hanzala, ma bik, what's wrong with you? He said, Wallahi nafaqa Hanzala. Hanzala has become a hypocrite. And the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr says, how is this? Come on man, you're a good guy. He's like, yeah, I'm with the Prophet ﷺ, and I'm thinking of spirituality and prophethood and heaven and serious consequences if we do not take that, and there's all of this. And then I go away and I'm with friends or family and I start to lose all of that. And I feel like I'm starting to gain 2 personalities. You know what Abu Bakr said? Just think where we all stand, where we're all at right now. Abu Bakr said, well then Abu Bakr, I think I, as Abu Bakr, am also a hypocrite. How many of us thought that maybe we're hypocrites? How many of us thought, alhamdulillah, I'm Muslim? Be careful. لا يستكبرون عن عباده. We all have work to do. And so they said, let's go to the Prophet ﷺ. They go to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ smiled after listening to Hanzala. He said, don't worry, Hanzala. If you continue the way you are in my presence, all throughout your day, every day, the angels will come down, sit down with you, shake your hand, and have a gathering with you. But that's not your reality. He said, sa'a wa sa'a. He said, it's normal for you to take some time and relax and joke and have fun. But then that gives you strength and that makes you yearn to get back to that spiritual drive and focus of working for righteousness. Then you will have the strength to do it. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi sahbihi ajma'in. So what are the causes and the solutions of apathy? A sense of weakness, a feeling of, well, you know, religion is very difficult, it's too much, you know, I don't know about all that. A feeling of, you know, I've got other things to be focused on, called apathy. So the first thing that leads to spiritual apathy is heedlessness, ghafla. You just basically be comfortable with sin. كَلَّا بَرَّانَ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. The Prophet ﷺ explained it beautifully. What happened to these people who found themselves in a very serious situation on the Day of Judgment is, in their life, they came to know what was sin, meaning people who did not know what sin was are not accountable like people who do. Meaning Muslims should be harder on themselves than those who don't know. Rather than always being like, yeah, those Americans, why he's sitting there doing whatever he's doing. You have to switch our way of thinking. So, it says that whenever, the Prophet ﷺ said, whenever you sin, some black spot goes on your heart. And then you sin more and more and more, to the extent that your heart now, the light of God, whatever's in it, cannot come out, and whatever's on the outside cannot come in it. And now, spiritually, you become dead, because now you're just cool with sin. Sin is not a problem to you anymore. It's normalized. So, repenting is the healing solution of that. I have taken a lifestyle that says, I'm not really focusing on the value of my soul and the responsibility that I have as a conscious being for revelation and how do I live my life accordingly. So you repent and then you go to revelation, you join the jama'ah, and then you will grow. I've seen it in many people, starting with myself. So then there's the lack of resolve or focus. Maybe you're not sinning all the time, but you're not really deeply focused and intent upon being a servant of God. من هم بحسنة فلم يعملها كتب عند الله حسنة. Whoever said, you know what, I'm going to do something good, but then they didn't even do it. And it wasn't because they said, yeah, I don't care, I don't want to do it, but just something came up that they really couldn't do it. But they really wanted to do it. It will be recorded as they did one good deed. Meaning, whoever would be always thinking about something good to do, something that reflects a lifestyle of revelation, of knowing the Prophet, of knowing the Holy Quran, and living accordingly. And that's doing and not doing. So to say, you know what, I'm not going to do that, right? To have that attitude of a spiritual focus. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. Whoever would hope to meet God, meaning hopefully meeting Him to where He will embrace you and you will be forgiven and have your place in Him, then work righteousness. Work acts of righteousness. Work, not do, work. It's something that requires commitment and toil and discomfort when you start. But when you become on the right path is whenever it became natural to you. You don't even feel, Of course, those of you that are struggling, when you first start taking that step towards righteousness, your animal self and the devils of jinns and human beings are going to whisper to you, that's too much, it's too hard. Man, those people are strict or whatever. But the more you focus on rectifying your soul and turning to your Lord who blessed you with your soul and every blessing that you ever had, then it will become, you will find a natural inclination. You will get up, not just to pray Fajr, you want to go join the Jama'ah. You will not see somebody struggling except for you will go help them. You will not let a week go by except for you went to care and show love towards your mother and your father and so forth. This is what will happen naturally. Lack of remembering death and the hereafter. Just thinking, life is about life. No, life is actually about death. The Muslim poet, Brother Ali, is an amazing guy from Minnesota. He said, the art of truly living is knowing how to die. Meaning, if you understand what's coming after death, then you will live in a certain way. If you're not paying attention to that, you will not live in that way. You will live like you have an eternal life here on earth, and that's what it's all about. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when asked about istihya min Allahi haqq al-haya, to truly be shy and to have shame about where you stand spiritually with God, is tadhkur al-mawt wal-bila. Remember the death and that your body will wither away to nothing. That your body is not lasting. You're not living in eternity. And the next one is focusing on one aspect of Islam. There's so many people who deem themselves religious. And they focus on a few little issues. And they think that's the religion. They're like, okay, alhamdulillah, I pray my salawat and my sunnahs, and now I'm alhamdulillah a religious person. That is a very small amount of Islam. A very minuscule amount. Is it very important? It is crucial. But to think that you have nothing else to do now that you've reached religion is a big disservice to the ayah, udkhulu fis silmi kaffa. Enter into a state of submission completely with your whole self. Come to know when I wake up, how I deal with people, what kind of person at work I should be, what kind of family man, how I join the Muslim community, what is my priorities in my work outside of my worldly work to pay bills, what is my work to pay for my soul that I am responsible for. What am I actually doing, and where is the balance between the two? Is it way up here, worldly interest and benefit and connection, and then spirituality is way down here, and soul? Or is it at a reasonable pace where the Prophet ﷺ was? So all of this will come to fruition in my experience through the Jama'ah. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. I'tisam, there is tamassuk, there is al-akhd. I'tisam is a different word in Arabic. I'm not going to go into a long Arabic thing now. People have told me, many of us don't know Arabic, why you talk like that? It means to be connected to with a protective connection. That your connection here is not just that you're attached to it, but by being attached to that, you are protected as a result of it. That's i'tisam. Bihablillah, with the rope of God. Scholars have three different opinions. None of them are authoritative. They're all opinions of human beings. They're not a hadith or an ayah. Some said the Quran. Some said the Sunnah of the Prophet. And some said the actual community of believers. So since you have three opinions amongst the great scholarly tradition, we should combine them all. Knowing the Quran, knowing the Sunnah as a collective body. The Jama'ah, the mosque, the community, the works that we do together, how we build bonds together. That's how we will achieve greatness. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. We often emphasize that as forming coalitions of righteousness with others. But it means among us, work together, cooperate, establishing righteousness and piety. Do not work together on sin and aggression. If somebody that you're hanging around with is doing sins, Don't hang around with them. Don't even be in their presence. Advise them against, be like, you know what, I cannot hang out with you. The way you're living is contrary to spiritual truth revealed to a man who did limitless miracles. I'm not going to trust in my comfort with you when my comfort with him is being sacrificed. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. The Prophet said, the hand of God is with the unified believers. Alaykum bil jama'a wa iyyakum al firqa. The Prophet ﷺ said, it is an obligation that you stick together as a group and beware of separating yourselves into little groups. Your strength, فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ. You will be divided and you will lose your power and strength. Don't be separated and divided. Stick together. Put all your resources into building a strong, healthy jama'ah. The Prophet ﷺ said, he said, فَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ مَعَ الْوَاحِدِ. The devil will come with one. وَهُوَ مِنَ الْإِثْنَيْنِ أَبْعَدُ. And when there's two of them together, he's farther. And three and four. The more you bring together of believers with good hearts and good intentions, the stronger everybody's faith and works and actions will be as a collective. And that is exactly how the Prophet ﷺ succeeded, and that is exactly how Martin Luther King Jr. succeeded. I will conclude with a verse of the Quran. وَالَّذِينَ, plural, those who collectively جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who struggle and strive in our cause. And this is Surah Makkiyah, by the way, Surah Al-Ankabut. And so the scholars are saying, that this is, seeking knowledge, seeking wisdom and strategizing as a collective, taking their free time to work together. Then he says, we will guide them in the royal we will guide them to all of the paths of success. Paths, plural. When they do that together. هَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَّا الْإِحْسَانِ. We have to seek excellence. We have to become better. We have to up the bar of our spiritual lives. That is what we are called to do. Stagnance and apathy is the reason why the state of Muslims is the way it is. So ask Allah, Ya Allah, inspire us, encourage us, motivate us, give us the means to be your servants, help us to collectively work to establish your truth and your justice and your compassion in the world. Help us to become a people who truly see a spiritual family, who never look down upon any other Muslim or anybody else because of the color of their skin or their ethnicity or the language they speak or whatever it may be. Help us to unify because of that beautiful truth of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that urwat al-wuthqa, that deep connection and that special hold that if we stick to it, we will succeed and we will be protected and we will have eternal bliss in your favor. Resurrect us among those who are closest to the Prophet ﷺ because we followed his model. Raise amongst us leaders who will stand up for truth and justice, not fearing anyone except for the day in which they will be accountable to you for the actions that they made. Ya Allah, make us among those who understand and live and establish and struggle and strive to establish your truth in the world. وصلى اللهم على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.